So my husband just told me that my new glasses make me look like a Pokemon trainer with my yellow hat. So I'm not sure if I should be happy or offended about that. Hello everybody and welcome to Elle, Dani Houseplants. Today I wanted to do a little video and tutorial about what potting mix I use. It's actually my own personal potting mix recipe. I guess you could call it a recipe. As well as soil amendments and proper container and planter drainage. So if you're interested in learning any more about that, then go ahead and keep watching this video. If you've come here all the way from my Instagram page, then I really want to thank you for taking the time to actually come and watch my video. And if you are brand new to Elle, Dani Houseplants, then welcome and let's get started. I want to start out my video by going into the differences between what a potting soil and a potting mix is. Now, there's really only one major difference between the two, but that difference is kind of a big deal and it can kind of make or break the survival of your houseplants. And that difference is that a potting soil contains dirt while a potting mix does not. And I always recommend using a potting mix for your household indoor container plants. Because of the fact that it is super airy. The dirt inside soil can become super compacted. It can become way too tight of a space, essentially suffocating the roots of your plants. And that will eventually prohibit root growth. Now, a potting mix, on the other hand, is light and fluffy and has super good aeration and super good water retention. Now you can totally go out and buy, a pre-made potting mix. It's really easy to access. I've actually used this one right here. It's Miracle-Gro indoor potting mix, and it's worked just fine for me. And I think if you have one or two houseplants to supply, it works totally fine. Go ahead and just buy it. It's a lot easier. For somebody like me though, I have a lot of houseplants. I like to make mine in bulk and I really like knowing what's exactly going into my potting mix. So I know sometimes when you buy indoor potting mixes, you can get stuff like gnats or bugs or fungus or other kind of nasty stuff that you don't want. So I just started making my own potting mix and I really enjoy it a lot more than buying it, and I'm going to continue to do so, and hopefully you guys like it as well. Now, I would like to state that I am in no way a potting mix expert, nor will I ever be, probably. But I have done a lot of research, and I've combined all of these ingredients a ton of different ways to kind of determine what has worked best for me, and I finally found something that I really like, and that's why I wanted to share it today. Now this tutorial is exactly that. It's what works best for me. It might not work perfectly for you right away, but that doesn't mean it can't. You just have to play with it a little bit to determine what's going to work best for you. Now, say you're in a hot and dry climate and you have plants that are just really drying out super fast. You can always add ingredients like peat moss or other water retention properties to help with your potting mix, and the opposite is completely true also. So say you're always having waterlogged plants or plants that are suffering from root rot, you can always add in more aeration properties such as pumice or perlite, and I'll get into that more later. But basically this potting mix is completely customizable to you, and this is really a general potting mix, I guess I could call it, just like a general for all plants, and then you can really play with it back and forth to decide what plant needs what. Does that make sense? Maybe not. I don't know. So as you can see, I've laid out all of my potting mix ingredients, and I'm going to be using a measuring cup for the sake of showing proper proportions, but honestly I normally just eyeball it. So first we're going to start out with 3 parts Coco Coir. Now this is the bulk of your, and I'll get a close up here. This is going to be the bulk of your potting mix. You can see it just looks like regular potting mix, but you're going to use 3 parts of that. And Coco Coir comes in a tiny little brick when you get it in the mail. It's kind of packaged really tight, and what you're going to do is you're going to rehydrate it yourself with water. It's actually really easy to do, and it expands to be quite a bit. And like I said, you don't normally need a measuring cup for this. I just kind of eyeball it because, I don't know, why not? But I went ahead and already rehydrated it, and as you can see, it makes quite a bit. Another option you can use rather than the Coco Coir is peat moss, and peat moss tends to be a little bit cheaper and more readily available than Coco. But peat has really gotten into the gardening headlines about not being completely ethical. I was going to go all into detail about the ethics of it, but I really honestly just don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So just a quick overview, just to kind of let you know what's going on. Many credible sources are saying that peat moss mining is killing bogs, Canadian bogs actually to be specific. 80% of peat moss, I guess it's Coco Coir, but 80% of peat moss comes from Canadian bogs. And they're a really important ecosystem, and a lot of people are coming out saying, hey, the Canadian bogs are dying, they're not having time to replenish, but other credible sources, many credible sources are saying that they are being replenished just fine, and that less than 1% of bogs are actually being destroyed and harvested from. So honestly, I know nothing about bogs, and without being there firsthand to see what's happening, I can't really comment as to which is better ethical-wise. Personally, I use both. I think peat moss is better at plant starts, and for shipping rooted cuttings, I use peat moss, and I also think it has way better water retention for water-loving plants. Coco Coir, however, I do love as a potting medium. It has a neutral pH, although sometimes it can be contaminated with heavy salts. I always order through Triumph, and I'll link them below. I always get it from Amazon, but I have never had issues with salts with theirs before, and I really like it. It seems to be consistent every single time. So Coco Coir tends to be the bulk of my potting mix, and it's what I have for you now. But if you can access peat moss easier, don't be afraid to use it. I think either will be fine for your potting mix purposes. Okay, so I have my 3 parts Coco Coir in here, and next I'm gonna start adding in the amendments, soil amendments. And soil amendments basically just help the soil either, you know, filter out water better or absorb water better, and the nutrition and all that. So first up is aeration. Now, aeration is super important for plants. It makes it so that your plants don't just sit in the water and get root rot. And a lot of times people will use perlite. And perlite is the stuff that you are commonly used to seeing in store-bought mixes. It's that little white styrofoam ball looking things. I personally have just recently switched to pumice. Pumice has really kind of, I feel like it's taken off all of a sudden, to be honest, and I feel like a lot of people are kind of switching to pumice. It's a little bit heavier than perlite. It looks more like a rock, but it actually has these tiny little, let me see if I can get some close-up views here. It has these tiny little holes in them. Can you see those? Tiny little holes that help hold on to really good nutrients and microorganisms and important things that your plants need. So we have the 3 parts Coco Coir, and I'm going to add in actually 2 parts of the pumice. Here's 1 part, and I'm going to go ahead and mix in another part. I like a lot of aeration in mine. I think it helps preventing root rot, and I always seem to have, that seems to be my biggest issue, so I like to put in 2 parts of the aeration. Sorry, it's going to be kind of loud. I'm pouring it into the cup back here. Alright, so here is the second part. Just going to mix that all in, and this is honestly super fun to play with, so I don't know. You guys, maybe, I don't know, maybe you guys won't like it as much as I do. I really like it. So I mix this all in. And next up is the nutrients. Now, I talked earlier about how, you know, soil has a natural nutrients, potting soil does, because it has dirt in it. And dirt just has natural microorganisms and important things that plants need that potting mix just doesn't have on its own. Like I said, Coco Coir is a neutral pH. I mean, it just doesn't have any sort of, really anything in it. And the aeration, even though the pumice is good for holding on to microorganisms and stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily come with any in it, if that makes sense. So what you're going to want to add next, I actually like to use worm castings. Let's see if I can get that in the picture. And worm casting sounds super gross, but it doesn't have to be, I promise. It's really not that bad. It doesn't smell, it's worm poop. That's what it is. I'm going to tell you straight out. It's just worm poop. But you don't even have to touch it. You can just pour it into the bag and then pour it into your mix. And I like to use 1 part of this. 1 part worm castings. So basically it's 3 parts Coco Coir, 2 parts of the aeration pumice, and 1 part worm castings. And I'm going to add that here. I just add 1 part in there, and I mix all that in together. Set this back here. And like I said, it doesn't smell. It's really not that gross. It's like dirt. I mean, if you touch dirt outside, you've touched worm castings, to be honest. But yeah, I just mix that all in, and now you kind of have more of a potting soil looking mixture. And I just really, really like this one. This mixture it's really easy to remember. For one, it's 3-2-1. You know, 3 parts Coco Coir or peat moss, whatever you prefer. 2 parts aeration. I use pumice. You can also use perlite. Perlite works just as well. I just like it for the I just like it for the microorganism holding properties of pumice. And then 1 part worm castings. So now it's super fertilized, it's super healthy soil, it's got amazing microorganisms in it. And what I like to do from here is just, which normally this isn't super common, so you absolutely do not have to do this. But if you would like to, I like to add in a little bit of horticultural charcoal. Not a lot. Not a lot at all. I just do, honestly, like a little handful sprinkle. And I'm just going to pour it in here. And this also adds to aeration, but gosh, I can't even say it. Horticultural charcoal, you can see it there, actually removes impurities and bad things from your soil. So if your plant suffers from root rot a lot, I know I've used that example a lot, but basically to prevent your plant suffering from certain diseases and root rot and things like that, you can basically put in these little pieces of horticultural charcoal, and they will absorb those impurities, those nasty things in the soil, and keep them nice and healthy. And you could actually also put a layer of horticultural charcoal at the bottom of your pot. A lot of people normally use gravel in the bottom of your pots. Please do not ever, ever, ever use gravel in the bottom of your pots. And I'm going to get more into that when I talk about plant drainage. But yes, horticultural charcoal can be used. I'm actually going to do a close-up of the bag here so you guys can read it here. And it says right there, improves drainage and absorbs harmful impurities. Also encourages air circulation, and that's because it is also like the pumice or perlite, and where it's an aeration tool. So I really, really like this. This is something new for me. I don't ever use this very often. This is really, really new. I just started putting it into plants, and I'm really liking it so far, honestly. I think it's really made a difference personally. So yeah, that's it. That's the soil. It's looking pretty good, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, 3-2-1 recipe, super easy. 3 parts Coco Coir, peat moss, 2 parts aeration, perlite or pumice, 1 part worm castings, and just a little sprinkling of horticultural charcoal. And that's it. So I think now I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the planter and container drainage. Okay, so I started losing my light last night a little bit while I was filming, and so I decided to just wait for today to start filming a little bit more about planter pots and drainage, and hence the outfit change. So now on to pots. I always recommend using a planter with drainage holes. If you have a pot you really want to use that doesn't have a drainage hole, I recommend taking your nursery pot that you got your plant in and placing it into this pot that doesn't have a drainage hole. This is a Jubilee Ivy, by the way. Placing it into your pot, watering it, and then letting it kind of run through a little bit, removing your pot and actually dumping out the excess water. Now this is going to help prevent root rot, and it's going to help other damaging things. It's going to help prevent fungus gnats. Fungus gnats really like to sit in watery stuff like that. So I know a lot of people use the age-old idea of gravel in the bottom of your pot. But I really do not recommend this ever, ever, ever. If your pot has drainage holes like this one here, and you put the layer of gravel in the bottom, essentially you are just removing space for your roots to grow, it'll prohibit plant growth altogether. And the water, when it goes through, it'll run through the soil all the same. So there's really no point in doing it. If you have a pot like this that doesn't have a drainage hole and you're trying to use it as basically a water reservoir to collect any excess water, basically what's going to happen is you're going to have this area of gravel that's holding on to stagnant water, and it'll really promote bad bacterial growth, and your roots will sink down into the water and they'll just sit there and they'll get mushy and they'll eventually get root rot, and it's just really, really bad combination for your plant. So I do not recommend gravel really in any scenario. The only time I would recommend it is sometimes I will use, if I have a really big drainage hole and I'm worried about mud leaking out, I'll put one piece of gravel down in the bottom. I have done that before and I haven't had really any issues. Another option you can do rather than having the piece of gravel in the bottom of your pot is to actually cut out a piece of mesh screening. And you can lay that in the bottom of your pot and that works just as well. Now I do have a big fat disclaimer for this video or this segment about the potting drainage, because this does not apply to cactus, succulents, or air plants in any way. I know they need a lot more drainage, and I don't proclaim to be an expert on houseplants. I'm definitely 100% not. But I am in no way, shape, or form an expert on cacti or succulents or air plants in any shape or form. So don't look to my advice if you're looking to plant a cacti garden or something like that. Like I said, I don't know anything about them. So that is all I had for you here today. If you guys have any potting mix recipes that you use, let me know down below. If you liked this video, then go ahead and like and subscribe to me. I hope to be putting out some more soon. And if you have any other comments about what I should add into my potting mix or remove from my potting mix, I don't care. I'd love to hear it. So let me know, and thank you for watching.